One man's fascination with ladies of the evening terrorized a community. Had it not been for his arrogance, an old running shoe, and an unusual bullet fragment, he might never have been caught. Farming is big business in Bakersfield, California. The area boasts warm weather, flat terrain, and a sophisticated canal system for irrigation. In 1986, some hikers found evidence of a crime in one of those canals. An autopsy left no doubt she had been murdered.
There were multiple gunshot wounds that were discovered. One bullet was recovered from the spine, from the spinal canal, and the other one, the bullet was recovered from the chest wall.
The bullets were from a .38 caliber pistol.
And these two bullets were recovered, but there was one hole. So both of those bullets entered through the same hole, and that would lead me to believe that there was a type of an assassination going on here.
Decomposition made visual identification impossible, so the medical examiner relied on her fingerprints.
They can use the dusting powder like they use for picking up latent fingerprints, and the prints can be developed that way.
Her fingerprints were compared to thousands on file in the California State Database, and there was a match. The victim was 21-year-old Kay Bradley, who had an earlier arrest for prostitution. A background check revealed she had grown up in Los Angeles, was an A student in school, an accomplished horseback rider and dancer. Her aunt, who asked not to be identified, said Kay was destined for success.
She was very artistic and loved to sing, loved to dance as a child, and never misbehaved. I don't think she was ever grounded or punished. She was always very close to her family.
In the years after high school, Kay made some unfortunate choices.
A young girl that had become involved with the wrong crowd, with drugs, and which led to her being involved with certain people that were not really what I would say the type of people I want my daughter to hang out with.
The whole family was devastated because you try to figure out how this could happen or why this happened, or if someone was responsible.
Prostitution may have been how Kay financed her drug habit. Unfortunately, none of the other Bakersfield prostitutes recalled seeing her around the time she disappeared. After several months and hundreds of interviews, the trail of Kay's killer turned cold. But investigators didn't give up. Eventually, they got a break, but it came with a price. When the body of a second young woman was found in the very same canal.
And at that point, you start thinking, maybe it's a serial killer. Maybe there's something in the calendar or something, or the moon that causes a person to do this.
One year after the murder of Kay Bradley, the body of a second young woman was discovered in the same irrigation canal on the outskirts of Bakersfield, California. She appeared to be a teenager, but there was no identification on the body.
It was a whodunit, who is it, which is one of the hardest ones in homicide to work.
The autopsy revealed the girl was killed by 3 shots from a .38 caliber weapon.
She received several wounds from the right front and was down. And while she was down, the final shot would have been the one in the back.
Investigators searched the crime scene for clues.
On the cement curbing of the canal, we noticed that there was more blood. And so, in reading the crime scene, we know that the vehicle pulled off, parked on the shoulder. We're assuming that it was the victim's blood. And somebody then dragged the victim over to the canal and pushed her out.
Police found 3 different shoe impressions in the soft dirt near the canal. They were identified as Adidas brand running shoes. Forensic expert Greg Laskowski analyzed the bullets from the victim's body, specifically the lands and grooves created when the bullet passes through the barrel. These are unique to every gun. He compared them to the bullets recovered from Kay Bradley. They lined up perfectly.
The bullets from the first homicide victim and the bullets from the second homicide victim had the same class characteristics. That is, they had the same caliber, same make and type. They also had rifling characteristics on them that were identical.
The murder weapon was a Colt .38 caliber handgun.
I'm very familiar with those because I own one myself.
The ammunition was unusual too.
They were a lighter weight caliber than normal .38 calibers at the time. These were 110 grain semi-jacketed hollow points, which are typical of law enforcement ammunition.
It did occur to me at that time again, we're possibly looking for someone in law enforcement, security work, prison guard, that type of thing, because the perpetrator had disposed of that weapon. They kept it.
The first task facing investigators was to identify the young girl. Her description didn't match anyone listed in missing persons reports, and her fingerprints didn't match any on file with the California State Database. Since there was a condom wrapper near the victim's body, and because of the way she was dressed, investigators suspected she was working as a prostitute.
We started showing this Polaroid photograph of our victim's face. And on that first night that we were out there, we actually, by luck, found this prostitute who recognized the photograph. And she said that she recalled seeing the victim.
She was identified as 15-year-old Tracy Clark, a runaway from Seattle, Washington. Tracy's friend, a fellow prostitute, last saw her leaving with a customer driving an unusual vehicle.
She's seen Tracy Clark get into this vehicle, and that was the last time she was seen alive. She described this vehicle as a light-colored pickup truck with a camper shell with bubble windows on the side.
But there were thousands of similar trucks in California. But the murder weapon, the type used by law enforcement, was a definite clue. On a hunch, Bakersfield police looked inside their own community and discovered one of their colleagues owned a pickup truck matching that description. It belonged to Sheriff's Deputy Dave Rogers. Ironically, Rogers was Detective Solis's former partner.
We worked side by side for, I don't know, I'm guessing, 2 or 3 years in the same beat. He would back me up on calls and I would back him up. We would have coffee together.
Deputy Rogers, an 11-year veteran of the force, was well-liked and highly respected. To see if Rogers' truck was the one Tracy got into, investigators tried an unusual experiment.
I went and picked up the witness, and I told her, I'm going to take you for a drive, and I want you to see if you recognize any vehicles.
Investigator Loggy showed her a number of similar-looking vehicles in Bakersfield, but the one she identified was the one parked outside Deputy Rogers' house.
She immediately started hollering, that's the truck, go arrest him. And I says, are you sure? And she said, I'm positive.
When questioned, Rogers denied any involvement in the murders. His service revolver, a Smith & Wesson .357 Magnum, was clearly not the murder weapon. And there was no record Rogers ever owned a Colt .38 caliber handgun. Both investigators and prosecutors needed much more than just their suspicions that Rogers was somehow involved.
My job is to present enough evidence to satisfy the standard of beyond a reasonable doubt. There's a jury instruction on what reasonable doubt is, and it's not just any doubt, but it's not beyond any doubt. It's just a reasonable doubt. That is, it really couldn't be anybody else but this man.
Bakersfield detectives had 2 unsolved murders. A suspect who was a member of law enforcement, but little else. So investigators went back to the witness who saw the second victim, Tracy Clark, getting into a light-colored truck and asked her if she could identify the driver. They showed her a photographic lineup consisting of 6 individuals.
I advised the witness that I was going to show her a series of photographs that she may or may not recognize. Don't be afraid to say that you don't recognize anybody. You don't have to.
It didn't take long.
So that's the guy that drove that pickup truck that I seen Tracy get into the last time she was seen alive. And she pointed to Rogers, David Rogers.
At that point, I didn't quite soak in, I can believe that we're looking at a deputy on the murder of 2 prostitutes.
Deputy Dave Rogers once again denied any involvement in the murders. Since these were his colleagues, Rogers may have felt more comfortable during his interrogation than others would, and he did something consistent with that. He put his foot up on the desk. And Detective Mike Loggy remembered something.
And I looked down and looked over, and there was the shoe tracks, the shoe that resembled the shoe tracks that was taken at Tracy Clark's scene.
Was it possible that Rogers, an experienced law enforcement officer, would wear the same shoes to a murder interrogation he wore to commit the crime? Detectives sent Rogers' shoes to forensic analyst Greg Laskowski.
There was the center logo, which identified the shoe as being Adidas, and the overall size of the shoe was consistent. But there was a chunk out in the tread pattern.
Laskowski pressed the tread pattern of Roger's shoe into a mixture of fingerprint powder, Comet cleanser, and very fine clay. And sure enough, Laskowski saw the same tread patterns and same nicks and indentations in Roger's shoe impression that he saw in the impressions found at the crime scene.
I was astounded to be able to identify David Rogers' shoe as having been at the crime scene.
But to prosecutor Sarah Riles, it wasn't enough.
I mean, you can put the 3 scoops of ice cream in there, that's fine, but it's not a banana split. But you've got to add the bananas, you've got to add the whipped cream and the cherry. The whipped cream and the cherry are the fluff. They're what makes it look good. The bananas are what makes the case.
In the back of Roger's truck, police found dozens of pairs of women's underwear, nude pictures of prostitutes, and a .38 caliber Colt revolver.
That was just unbelievable. You couldn't put in words what one was thinking at that point. It's as if, is this really all true? Is this a coincidence?
To see if it was the murder weapon, it was fired into a water-filled tank to stop the bullet.
It slows down the bullet, and relatively quickly, within a matter of 1 to 2 feet, the bullet falls harmlessly to the bottom of the tank where it can be collected.
A comparison of that bullet and those found at both crime scenes left no doubt that this gun was used in both murders. Now, Sarah Riles was satisfied.
You know, it was all so clear then. Once we had all that laid out, I mean, there was nothing else it could be. And it was extremely important.
And from the serial number, investigators discovered the gun was registered to the owner of a local diner. Interestingly, several years earlier, Deputy Rogers investigated a burglary call at that same diner. Behind the cash register was the owner's Colt .38 caliber pistol. Apparently, Rogers stole it.
David Rogers went in there and picked that thing up and put it in his pocket, and he wrote down the theft report on it. He had that gun ever since, and he used it to kill 2 human beings with. So that made me angry.
Dave Rogers was arrested and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder.
When Dave Rogers was identified and arrested, I was angry. I was shocked. You know, I trusted him with my life. You know, who knows, you know, for whatever reason, you know, I could have been a victim. I mean, those kind of crazy thoughts at one point in time went through my head.
Once in custody, he offered some chilling insights into why a seemingly normal family man could not control his compulsion to kill.
My head goes crazy. It spins. You know what I mean? I get to thinking about something, you know, and it keeps going and going and going.
The citizens of Bakersfield were shocked to learn that a law enforcement officer was charged for the murder of 21-year-old Kay Bradley and 15-year-old Tracy Clark. Dave Rogers' wife had difficulty believing it.
Great family man, good human being. And this is the Dave Rogers that I know.
It's hard to imagine that a guy like that is a killer, and presumably a pretty cold-blooded killer.
But the forensic evidence was overwhelming.
When it came to trial, this case was not a whodunit. The question was what motivated this defendant and what was his degree of guilt? What was his state of mind at the time of the killing?
In a taped interview with a prison psychologist, Rogers admitted soliciting prostitutes.
I'm not prejudiced. I have solicited blacks, I have solicited whites, I have solicited Mexicans.
Well, it's not that formal as they solicit.
Well, that's what I've done, you know. I've gone out and solicited prostitutes.
And eventually, Rogers admitted taking Tracy Clark to the canal. He claimed the two had a disagreement.
She made some comment to him that I've been here too long. Now you have to give me more money or something like that.
I don't know whether she called me a queer or a faggot or something like that, but I think she brought up me having different sexual preferences.
Rogers claimed he threw Tracy out of the truck, but that she stood in front of it and refused to move. He also claimed she threatened to file a police report.
You're making it sound like a self-defense because he claimed that Tracy Clark was screaming and hollering and scratching him and that sort of thing at the scene.
Rogers' mistake was getting out of the truck to drag Tracy's body into the canal, leaving his shoe impressions in the soft dirt. His second mistake was wearing those same shoes to his interrogation.
As luck would have it for us as the investigators, that he was careless. He was very careless, and he left a lot of evidence at the scene. He left evidence in his truck. He left evidence at home.
Rogers had no explanation for why he killed his first victim, Kay Bradley.
He made a comment, if they did match my gun, then I must have done it, but I don't remember.
Rogers claimed his actions were caused by parents who emotionally and physically abused him as a child.
You know, to say that he was some sort of really nice guy who was just reacting to his childhood just kind of makes you want to throw up.
Rogers also hinted he welcomed the death penalty.
I can't deal with having killed this other person. I did not believe I should live. I'm not.
Are you saying, though, in some ways you plotted your own demise?
I just gave them what they needed.
So you knew you had a plan?
Yes.
Dave Rogers went on trial for the murder of Kay Bradley and Tracy Clark. It took the jury 2 days to find him guilty. He was sentenced to death.
Juries like to be able to figure out things for themselves. They like to not play detective, but play detective story writer, in which they have a lot of clues and they can put them together and say, this can only be this man.
As far as I'm concerned, he's as worthless as there is, but he'll probably outlive me. He's sucking my air, and I'm paying for his room and board up there as a taxpayer.
When I think about this case, the thing that really comes to my mind is how he really led that double life, how he seemed to be one thing and was accepted as that respectable law enforcement officer, and yet at night, like Jekyll and Hyde, he'd go out and have a completely different side, and how he seemed to have fooled everybody in his life until the criminalists and the forensics caught up with him.